Our flash contact. A single screw, the flash contact, that plastic block, that's some sort of styrene plastic, very fragile, frequently broken. Whatever remains of it you want, so even if it's slightly damaged, that's better than it being not present at all. Okay, so there is no plastic insulator in there, which means that probably the flash contact didn't work correctly. Yeah, it has fallen out. It was on the bench. That tiny speck there on the end of my finger, it's a plastic insulator. We want that because it's no fun making new ones. Alright, back to this. Come on, video camera, wake up. Nothing more needs to come off the top of that mechanism plate. 3 screws hold the shutter case and the mechanism plate together. Separate these two. So here's the mechanism plate with the shutter blades on it. Here's our case with the diaphragm blades in it. This is quite stiff in its action. I'm not seeing much distortion on those blades. I think that probably there's dried grease in behind the settings lever here. We'll start with this anyway. So I'll swing that round to expose these 2 screws. They hold the setting lever to the moving plate inside the mechanism here. Here's our settings lever, not much to see there. A little bit greasy, nothing particularly noticeable. Recover the 2 shoulder screws. Check the action of that diaphragm. Yeah, that's not particularly stiff, so any problem was just in this dirty, greasy layer here between that and the settings lever. So this apart, 10 diaphragm blades in there, and I want this all out. 3 small screws. 2 of them are identical, the other one is a countersunk head screw. Just took this lot out. There's the case, there's the moving plate that connects to the settings lever. Our rosette of blades, there's 10 blades there. They're a bit oily, they'll certainly need to be all cleaned. Here's the retaining plate. It looks to be in quite good order, a little bit oily, that'll need to be cleaned carefully, and the 3 screws that held that together. So that's that part. They'll need to be cleaned. Let's have a look at this mechanism plate. Well, the shutter blades are busy falling off here. They weren't stuck together, but you can see there's traces of oil on those blades. If I hold that to the light, right, you can probably see, yeah, you can see oily marks on those blades. They all need to be cleaned. The mechanism plate itself, blade actuating ring seems to return quite promptly. There are no great problems here. Unhook this spring. This lever works the blade actuating ring. Take the screw out of that. Sometimes there's a washer under there, a little shim washer. Not very frequently, and there isn't in this case. We'll have that off. 4 screws? No, 4 screws hold this plate in place. 3 of them are short ones. These are typically locked in place with Loctite or something like Loctite. One of those screws didn't play nicely at all. It's going to give me trouble. This is a long screw in this position. The other three are all short. Yeah, this one here is giving me trouble. Well, with enough downward pressure on the screwdriver, that came out. You can see the head's not very pretty. Still works. Here's the retainer plate. This is the blade actuator ring, the piece that swings backwards and forwards and swings the blades inwards and outwards. And I can see here there's dried grease on there that certainly all needs to be cleaned away. And the mechanism plate itself with the retard gear train on it. This piece works the pallets, engages or disengages the pallets. When the pallets are engaged, this runs slowly. When the pallets are engaged like that, run very slowly. When they're disengaged like that, this should run fast. Now that's not moving at all. That's jammed. It's starting to work after a fashion as I move it backwards and forwards. That should be quite prompt in its action. So this mechanism is clogged up with dust and dried grease. I don't normally remove that from the mechanism plate to clean it. Normally I clean that in place with some naphtha, work it repeatedly, blow out all the naphtha until I've got that working nice and freely. That's really sluggish. Okay, so that's the shutter stripped down, ready to be cleaned. Just for a change, I'll start by cleaning up the mechanism plate, and I'll start with this retard gear train. And I can see immediately I put some naphtha in there that moved quite freely. So it was just stuck with dried out lubricants, dust, but it'll quite possibly been oiled, and oil doesn't last. It tends to go sticky. Beyond that, it'll go to a hard lacquer. I'm sure you can find modern marvellous synthetic wonder drugs that'll promise to last forever, never dry out, maintain its properties for 1,000,000 years. Whether it does or not is anyone's guess. Okay, so that appears to be very good. I'll lubricate that with some graphite powder, but I think basically that's done. I'll clean the mechanism plate itself now. On the underside, where the blade actuating ring revolves around the centre here, that's all got to be cleaned. All these surfaces here at the edge where the shutter blades will swing out over those, they've all got to be cleaned. There's not much coming off on here, that's quite clean. Around the centre here you can see the grease, that's quite yellow. That's which is a good sign in one way. It means that there hasn't been an awful lot of dust and rubbish getting in here, because otherwise it would have gone grey or black with the dust and rubbish. It's quite possibly the original grease. Got to watch out for the spring here. This spring on the end of our speed train, got to make sure you don't catch that on the cleaning while you're cleaning it. And this one here, which returns the arm that swings the blade actuating ring backwards and forwards. You've got to be careful not to catch that too. Now what I normally do, in order to get my cotton bud round this side, I've got to get this out of the way. If I hold back the tab here, swing that arm in, that'll lock this back in place. Now one of the reasons you do that is there's a hairspring in here. If that's not wound up nice and tight, when you try to come round here with your cotton bud to clean those surfaces, it will catch on that hairspring and damage it. And you know, that's not as fatal as damaging the hairspring on a watch, but it's very undesirable. It means that the hairspring is what powers this basically. What causes this to swing backwards and forwards nicely is that hairspring. If you bugger it up, things won't work smoothly. Well, this all appears to be quite good. Now I'll clean the inside here of the lens tube. Make sure that's all clean at the back. I think that's good to go. So we need to clean the blade actuating ring. I've already noted that that had some dirty marks on it from dried grease. Yeah, they're cleaning away nicely. And more so on this surface. You can see that the bit of dirt come off there. It's mostly dried grease, bit of dust. So that's good. The retaining plate. Let's see what sort of state this is in. This is the side that faces the blade actuating ring, or faces the mechanism plate. That's quite good. It's got its usual complement of fingerprints on there etched into it, but they're not badly etched in, they're not causing a problem. This surface faces the shutter blades. It's in quite good order. Has its matching complement of fingerprints, but they're not etched in there deeply. That'll be fine. The lever from the top of the shutter. Just wanting that clean because the old grease will have gone sticky. Any old grease that was on there would go sticky and cause problems. And I'll just make sure that the screw for that is clean. The other screws are sitting there waiting to go. Right, well, that mechanism plate I can assemble. Hurry up, camera. Put the blade actuating ring in position. Put the cover plate in position. This has got a little rivet on it. It only fits in one position. There are 4 screws. One of the short screws is a little bit mutilated looking. This one. That'll be okay though, it'll do its job. That's where the long screw goes. This is the other short screw position. And the long screw goes here. I know where the screws go from long experience of doing these shutters, but often you'll find shutters people have made little marks on them, scratched a little mark on them to tell them where the odd screw goes so they don't waste any time reassembling things. This one doesn't want to start. slacken that screw off. That plate might not be pulling into line particularly well. And we're away now. Just checking that damaged screw head, that there's nothing sticking up proud of the surface here to catch on shutter blades. Doesn't appear that there is. That's fine. The lever on the top, yeah, normally I just wipe the pivot with some molybdenum paste, and that slot is where it runs on that pin that sticks up from the blade actuating ring over here. Just a bit of loose cotton there, I'll get rid of that. And the screw goes on the top. Put its return spring in place. Check the action. It's nice and snappy, that's good. Right, so I'm going to lubricate this mechanism plate with some graphite powder. Basically I'll just drop some in around here, work this backwards and forwards to work it in well, blow out the excess. With the retard gear train here, basically the same thing. Sprinkle some graphite powder onto here, hold back the pallets, work the arm repeatedly backwards and forwards, blow out the excess. That'll be lubricated and that'll be ready to go. Well, the mechanism plate is ready to go. The case and diaphragm of course need to be serviced first. So I'm just cleaning the back of that case all around the thread on the outside where the retaining ring goes, all around the inside of the rear lens tube here. So I'm just cleaning the outside of the case, clean the top surface of the case, and then clean the inside of the case. This all needs to be free from dust, dried grease, other contaminants. It's not uncommon for it to be a bit oily. That oil would have seeped in from the focus helical. That's cleaning up well. Pop that case to one side. Do these other pieces. The retainer plate here looks pretty good. Sometimes there's a little bit of corrosion on here. Usually etched in fingerprints are the culprit. You can see by the colour of this cotton bud that there's something coming off the surface. Some of that will be oil. Some of that's probably just some surface oxidation and dust. You see I'm just handling this by the edges. If you wanted to be really fussy, you could be wearing your nitrile gloves or your finger cots. This is the moving plate, the plate that swings backwards or forwards with the position of the aperture settings lever and swings the aperture blades inwards or outwards as a result. This is quite clean and free from corrosion. There's a few marks on the surface, but there's nothing there to cause me any concern. Bit of a dark spot there, I can't tell what that is. Whether it's etched into the surface or something on it. I'll just run a tip of my tweezers across that, see what I feel. I think it's just etched into the surface. There's no point wiping away at that furiously, it's not going to get any better. And here's the settings lever. Now this is greasy, and that grease will have gone sticky with age, and that's what was creating the drag on the settings, aperture settings. Now I've got to clean the blades. Well, I've got 10 diaphragm blades here. I'll put those screws to one side, I'm not doing anything to them. And all of these have got to be cleaned to get rid of any oil on the surface. There's a few marks on these blades. Some of that's oil staining. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that is. That all needs to come off. But basically I need to make sure that they're free from oil. The marks are very much secondary, they don't really cause any problem. But I need to have them free from oil so that they don't stick, so that they slide smoothly across each other. Otherwise they can end up getting damaged. If their blades are sticky with oil, what tends to happen is on a nice cold day when the oil is very thick and viscous, someone wants to change the aperture setting and they push the lever and the blades don't want to move, something's going to give. And typically it means that the blades get distorted or the little pivots on them get pulled out of their sockets, usually probably more commonly in the moving plate than the fixed plate, but sometimes the other way. And you end up with an opening which is not circular and a lever which doesn't want to go anywhere useful. So they need to be cleaned. The shutter blades, basically the same deal for those, they'll need to be cleaned. There's certainly oil spots on the surface or marks, and hopefully that'll all clean away. If there was any obvious problems with any roughness on the blades from corrosion, then they'd need to be polished with Brasso, but there doesn't appear to be any serious issue there. So I'll clean these diaphragm blades and then I'll be back. You've seen me clean those before. Basically it's just using naphtha, cotton buds, and a lot of care and attention so that you don't catch anything on the rivets and tear the rivets out. That's not easily done. Or just bend the blade. You never want to bend the blade. Well, I'm cleaning this blade, and the imperfections, the surface marks you can see on there, I've looked at those. That's not oil on the blades, it's not a deposit on the blades. That's scuff marks where it's scuffed through the black finish on the blade. So there's no future in trying to polish those away. Basically you'd just be polishing more of the black finish away and effectively making your marks bigger than they currently are. So that is a cleaned blade. Those marks there they are where that surface has been scuffed away. I don't think I can get this to catch the light so that you can see the shiny metal through those patches, but that's basically what it is.